Meeting of the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, Electrical Safety and Licensing Advisory Board meeting to order. It is 10:08 a.m. on this Thursday, March the 28th. With that, Anna, I'm going to turn it over to you for certification of quorum.
Yes, sir. Stacy Mighty.
Present.
Thank you. Marcus Lundergreen.
Present.
John Sparrow.
Present.
Troy Webb.
Present.
Christopher Bass. Mark Matheny.
Here.
I'm sorry, that is my fault. I had the YouTube running in the background. Probably shouldn't do that while I'm in the meeting. Mark Matheny, did I get
Here.
Okay, thank you. Lydell Toy. Kim Allen.
Present.
And presiding officer Mark Roach.
Present.
We have a quorum, sir.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Yes, sir.
Moving on to item C, approval of the minutes. I'm assuming that everybody's had an opportunity to read them while we've been waiting here, at least, if not before. So if there's no questions or comments, I will entertain a motion. If you need a minute or two to review, I'll grant that and move forward then. Waiting for a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Oh, go ahead.
Mark Matheny, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Kim Allen, I'll second.
Thank you, Kim. I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? There being none, Anna, if you'll call the roll for vote for approval of
Yes, sir.
minutes.
Stacy Mighty.
Aye.
Marcus Lundergreen.
Aye.
John Sparrow.
Aye.
Troy Webb.
Aye.
Mark Matheny.
Aye.
Kim Allen.
Aye.
And Mark Roach.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Anna.
Yes, sir.
All right. Moving on to item D, public comment. Any person wishing to address the board must submit by an email by following the public comment instructions. I'm assuming that I think we received some comment input and we have somebody present that wants to move into the meeting for public comment.
Yes, sir. Dale Hansen is now in the meeting.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Dale.
This is the time where I make my little spiel.
This would be it.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I just didn't know. I'm still new to this whole WebEx thing.
Of course.
My name is Dale Hansen. I'm with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 16, San Antonio, Texas. I've been licensed as a journeyman since 2019, and I'm here to share my opinions on the implementation of House Bill 1391, particularly the CTE program and the practical component. I feel that I really need to emphasize and underscore that practical experience is a critical part to learning any physically demanding job, whether it's weightlifting, whether it's karate, or whether it's electrical work. Hitherto until recently, to be able to sit for the residential wireman's license, one needed to have 4,000 hours. That's more or less a year. I'm sorry, 2 years of actual practical experience. And that time actually matters. One of the brothers here in the union, he did residential for about 20 years before he got into doing commercial, which is our bailiwick. And I asked him, hey, what do you think about this? Because I have very little residential experience, but I'm still an electrician. I still had to learn. And he told me that he wasn't even comfortable doing anything by himself until late his second year, early his third year. And that was my experience as well. Obviously, everyone has different experiences. Everyone has abilities to learn, but because there was such a strong practical component to electrical work in residential and commercial and industrial, I feel that you need to have a strong background to be able to develop those habits, to be able to get that muscle memory to effectively do your job safely and efficiently. And, looking at how this would work, of a high school kid, and I'm not doubting the sincerity of the teachers, I'm not doubting the competency of the program, and I'm not doubting how much the kid in particular wants to learn. I'm assuming, he's gung ho and ready to go, but if you only have, what is it, the equivalent of like what, 1,500 hours of actual practical experience, that's effectively lowering the standard from 4,000 to less than half. And in my opinion, that is a disservice to that individual as an electrical professional, to the industry as a whole, and I would dare even say to public safety. I know that me personally, I wouldn't be very comfortable if the equivalent of a first-year apprentice was wiring up my house. I just wouldn't be comfortable with it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying realistically, the propensity for error is very, very high. And that makes me very uncomfortable because they just don't have the experience. If I go over and say, hey, you need to run this 12-2 through Romex, you need to make a home run from here to there, and then you need to run a dedicated circuit over there. If the kid doesn't have a whole lot of experience, he may or may not be able to, much less understand that, but then implement it in a way that's code compliant. The other part that bothers me here is the fact that, within the CTE program, somebody will be able to serve as an instructor without any verifiable field experience. And I get it. We do have a shortage of educators and on-the-job trainers, and you have to make do with what you got. But lowering the standards to where you let somebody, to where you will permit, to where it's feasible for somebody with no field experience to be instructing people with very limited experience who could go on to start wiring up residencies, apartments, single-family units. To me, that's troublesome. To me, that's lowering the standards. And we shouldn't be lowering the standards as a society, whether it's on academic tests or whether it's in actual experience for licensure of what could very well be dangerous work. And this is not a partisan issue. One of the members of the Koch brothers, he's by no means a left-leaning kind of guy, but he said in an interview with Tim Ferriss, anytime you have an industry where things can go boom, I'm paraphrasing here, but anytime you have an industry where things can go boom, you want to have some sort of licensure to ensure that the people who are performing that work have some demonstrated level of competency in that given field.
Mr. Hanson, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your time is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Dale, I neglected to inform you that you had 3 minutes, and I apologize for that. So, but I think we get your point. So, all right, Anna, is there anybody else?
No, sir.
Okay, and we received some written comments. Do we read those at this point, or do we just acknowledge the fact that they've been sent in?
We just acknowledge them. We don't read them out loud to
Okay,
everybody.
very good. All
Thank
right.
you, sir.
All right, with that said then, I'm going to move from public comment item D to item E, staff reports. And we'll start off with the licensing division with Yvonne Lopez.
Good morning, Presiding Officer Roach and Advisory Board members. Yvonne Lopez with the Licensing Division. You see before you the licensing division statistics. We do show the fiscal year totals for FY 2023 and fiscal year 2024 as of February of this year. You see the electricians' overall population, the contractors overall, and then there's the breakdown. And then as you scroll down, you'll also see a summary of the volume of emails compared to last year. So you can see that the email volume went down. So we're hoping that trend continues, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Yvonne. Does anybody have any questions? There being none. All right, Yvonne, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item E2, Education and Examination Division, and call on Marco Rodriguez for your report.
Good morning, Presiding Officer Roach and Advisory Board members. My name is Marco Rodriguez, and I'm an auditor with the Education and Examination Division, and I'm here to present our report today. The first thing that we're gonna look at is our examination statistics. And as you can see, our current statistics are very similar to fiscal year 2023. And farther down, we have the examinations statistics by license type. And okay, the next item is our continuing education course provider and curriculum statistics. And as you can see, they're also very similar with fiscal year 2023. Below, we see the electrician apprentice programs. And as you can see also, they're very similar to fiscal year 2023. And at the very bottom, we have the early journeyman exam statistics. This concludes my report, and I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Marco. Does anybody have any questions? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This morning. Okay. Moving on to item E3 of the agenda, Customer Service Division. I call on Patricia Martinez Castellan. Patricia, are you?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, that's you. Okay.
Good morning, advisory board members. I'm Patricia Martinez Castellan. I'm manager in customer service, and I'll be presenting our stats for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. Across the months for fiscal year 2023, customer service contacts remained substantial, peaking in March with 7,052 and staying consistently high throughout the year. This is expected as this is one of our most high populated programs. And moving on to fiscal year 2024, we noticed a spike in contacts during January, which may have to do with seasonal trends or holiday backlogs. We did explore data that capture the main reasons for customer contacts in both fiscal years, and we found that the primary reason regards license status, inquiries, general information, and requests for information. But that overall includes my report. Please let me know if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
That is an interesting spike. That's quite a number. Does anybody have any questions? There being none, Patricia, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item E4 from the Enforcement Division. Call on Cynthia Marple.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, board members. My name is Cynthia Marple, and I'm a prosecuting attorney with the Enforcement Division, and I will cover some highlights from our Enforcement Division report. You may notice that we have updated the format for the Enforcement Division report from our last meeting when there was a report. We've reorganized the materials so you can compare one fiscal year to another more clearly because they're side by side. We're also using the same number of months to compare the fiscal years. So that means each set of stats is for the same set of months. So we're not comparing the full fiscal year of 2023 to a partial fiscal year of 2024. So you see here at the very top, we have the division's performance measures. These are reported to the legislature. And these performance measures are stable between the two fiscal years, very similar, maybe slightly lower. And then going down to the criminal history review section, as you can see, we have a low percentage of licenses either denied or revoked based on criminal history issues. It is less than 2% for both fiscal years. If you go down, you'll see complaints received by source, but I'd like to go to the top of page 2 because there are pie charts, which I think are easier to understand. So these show our sources of complaints. And as you can see, electrical is a little different because the bulk of them are criminal history complaints as opposed to departmental and consumer, which is interesting. And those criminal history complaints would involve applicants or people renewing who may have a disqualifying criminal history event. And those are handled by our criminal history prosecutors. And if we go down to the penalties and consumer remedies section, you will see a section for restitution. As you can see, we are doing restitution here in fiscal year 2024 because we do feel that helping complainants be made whole is an important part of enforcement. And if you go on to page 3, you will see our cases closed without disciplinary action section. This is a place where enforcement can really shine, because our goal is not just to collect penalties, but we do try to gain compliance with the laws and rules for the program. So if a licensee is able to take corrective actions, sometimes the case can be closed as informally resolved. And in some situations, the respondent has come into compliance before the attorney has reviewed the case. For example, an unlicensed person may have obtained the license, or they fix the electrical issues for the complainant. So in addition to restitution, we also seek to gain compliance and will close as informally resolved. And there are situations where after an investigation, there is insufficient evidence to support any violations. And in cases there, sometimes respondents did not violate the regulations. And moving down, you'll also see the top alleged violations at case opening. And criminal history is usually opened by the department, because our licensing division does check for that with applicants and renewals. And the other, complaint-based items start at number 2, when complainants call in and complain about their particular respondent. And then if you go down, you also see the violations commonly resulting in disciplinary action. And it tracks the criminal history is still number 1 on those as well. And then if you go down a little bit, you'll see some case highlights starting on page 4. There is an inadvertent mistake here. The second case is titled incorrectly. It should be ELC 2021-000-9791 for a William E. Rundles. The facts within those are correct. It just had an inadvertent title error. And then you'll see lower down, we have some special projects that happened. In June of last year, a sting was done to catch unlicensed electricians and air conditioning folks that were advertising, but turned out to not be licensed, and that did result in 47 enforcement cases. And then the community outreach, our senior prosecutor, Jessica Hurtado, spoke at a panel at the annual National Association of State Contractors Agencies, or NASCLA, the conference in San Antonio. She was on a panel discussing how various states handle the licensing of individuals with criminal history issues. And finally, we come down to our complaint prioritization process. This was done at the direction of the Sunset Commission, and the Enforcement Division has completed the review of the electrical's most frequent violations to identify and prioritize those that pose the greatest risk of consumer harm or actual or potential physical injury. Our goal is to focus our limited resources on the greatest impact to public health and safety in a more efficient way. And there's more detailed information here in your packet, but we just want to let you know that we have completed this sunset recommendation for all our programs, and it has been implemented. Thank you for your attention, and please let me know if you have any questions. I can't hear you, Mr. Roach.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you very much. That's a pretty comprehensive report there. I've always been sort of amazed at the consistency in the numbers. You'd think that things would change over the years, but I don't guess they do. All right, members of the board, any questions that you have for Cynthia? There being none, Cynthia, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Moving on to item E5, Compliance Division. Call on Larry Reichel.
Good morning, Chairman Roach, advisory board members.
Let me rephrase, Larry. Let me call on Grandpa.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chairman Roach and advisory board members. As a sort of changing of the guard, my name is Larry Reichel. I'm the Chief Electrical Inspector for TDLR, previously Deputy Chief for the last 17 years. As you look at my report, it's been very technical past 5 months. When we adopt the NEC, NFPA goes right into the next edition of it. So we have been, task group meetings through November and December. January was more of a department technical situation. And then at the end of January was in Charleston, South Carolina for the first voting on the public inputs on the 2026 NEC. That date for the next time any NFPA with the NEC usually goes from one side of the country to the other. So we started on the East Coast, and then in October it'll be on the West Coast. And then after that, in February, we had our teleconference with the National Electrical Reciprocity Alliance, and Montana will be holding the in-person in August. And then in February, this last month, we had our electrical exam committee review. And Mr. Roach, you're aware of that. Mr. Kim Allen sits on it. We get a lot of stuff done in there for the exams for the state of Texas electricians. That concludes my report, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Only question I've got for you, Larry, you getting settled in all right? In your
Yes,
position
sir, I
there?
am. Busy.
Are you flying solo still?
Still flying solo, yes, sir.
Okay. Members of the board, does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Roach, I did want to let you know that Lydell Toy is now in the meeting.
Oh, great.
Lots of.
Hello, Lydell.
Oh, sorry, you're muted, Mr. Toy.
Muted.
Lots of
You're muted,
acrobatics
Lydell.
he had
Yeah,
to
there you
do
go.
to get in the meeting.
Yeah,
There you go.
sorry about that. Yeah, must have been a Chinese hacker in my office today or something. I don't know.
Certainly, it wouldn't be like me, the gray hairs causing the difficulty of actually making things perform correctly.
Yeah, my apologies. Sarah.
Not a problem. I'm glad you're with us. Glad you figured it out. All right. Does anybody have any questions of Larry?
Yes, it's just as Troy. Hey, Larry, so do you know where we're at with increasing our reciprocity with other states at this time?
Yes, sir. We're constantly working on it. In fact, our last meeting we just had Vermont come into the Reciprocity Alliance. Each and every time we have an open door policy with NERA that if someone wants to come in and give their spiel on their state, they are more than welcome to. And then the NERA group takes a vote. And usually, if they're equal in requirements for their journeyman, they usually get voted in. But it's an open door policy for any state that wishes to come and talk to NERA.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't know if we had any more states coming down the road that we couldn't join.
At this time, we just had at our last meeting, Vermont was voted in.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And we are continuing with no reciprocity on master's licenses, correct?
At this point, we have Louisiana, North Carolina, and just got Nebraska.
Okay, so we have 3.
Yes, sir.
Larry, how are we doing with Colorado?
Colorado's had a lot of change in their staffing. We always get to a certain point, but then the staff changes. I can reach back out to them again to see where they want to go with it. But we were so close to getting that reciprocity, but their staff changes, and then no one in their agency is familiar with it. So it's kind of a up and down with Colorado right now.
And I'll jump in, Doug Jennings, General Counsel. Mr. Toy, I reached out to Colorado. We were in the process during, the timeline is a little fuzzy for me because of COVID. I'm sure some of you understand that. But we had reached out, and actually, I think we had reached a final draft that we had submitted and kind of negotiated with some of the staff at DORA up in Colorado. And I thought signature was imminent, and so we could submit it to our governor's office for approval. And then that just stalled. And a couple of times I've reached out to try to get that going again. But we can certainly, with Larry's help, get back in touch. We have an agreement ready to go. So all we have to, I think it's just kind of the personal connection that we need to make over there. And assuming their standards haven't changed, we should be, if they're on board, we should be able to get that taken care of.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I know Jerry last time I talked to Jerry a while back, he said there was the same issue with the staffing, changing of staff and everything. So, okay, we'll continue on and just keep us posted. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? There being none, Larry, thank you very much for your report. And once again, congratulations. And if we see you just disappear very quickly, all we see is a picture
Thank
of your
you.
jerseys behind you. We know where you went.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
Okay. All right, moving on then to item E6 from the executive office. Steve Bruno, he just introduced himself earlier. Steve, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer Roach and Advisory Board members. It's so good to be with you today. My name is Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director, formerly Government Relations Officer with the department. I've been with TDLR a total of 11 years, and I'm proud to come to you today as Deputy Executive Director overseeing licensing services, and that comprises our divisions of licensing, customer service, and education and examination. I do have a few personnel updates I'd like to begin with. The first one, it's already been noted, but it's worth, I'd like to announce it as well, that we're very proud that Larry Reichel is our Chief Electrical Inspector after service as Deputy Chief for 17 years. It's a well-earned position, and the electrician industry in Texas, as you all know, is in very good hands with Larry. And of course, Larry, we wish you and your family all the best today as you become a grandfather. Our next announcement is that many of you know Brian Francis. Brian has returned as our interim executive director until June the 30th of this year. Other announcements include myself as deputy executive director, former government relations officer, and Brandy Myers is our other deputy executive director. Brandy was formerly Brandy Corrales, and she was formerly our director of financial services. Brandy has an intimate knowledge of our agency, and she and I have both hit the ground running as deputies, and we are really enjoying our times in service with these roles to TDLR. Next, I'd like to announce that we have a permanent director in our licensing division, Heather Muir. Heather was previously interim director. She's now permanent director. And I'll just give a preview. You're the first advisory board group to hear the news that in April, we'll be getting a permanent director of our customer service division. So we're very excited about that. Bill implementation update. As you all know, the biggest bill that passed that has an impact on your agency, on your profession, excuse me, is House Bill 1391. And I'll save that because you'll be discussing it at the next agenda item. Finally, I want to talk to you a little bit about our strategic planning process. Every agency is required by law to go through a strategic planning process every 2 years. And it's something that we are very excited about and very proud of the way we do here at TDLR. We want to hear from you and from all of the licensees and the public about 4 main questions: what we're doing well, what we can do better, what changes you would like to see, and then what predictions you have over the next 5 years for your industry. It helps us better serve you and carry out our agency's mission. We do have some opportunities coming up. We've got some in-person meetings coming up on Monday, April 1st, and this information is all available on the homepage of our website. We're going to be visiting Harlingen, Texas on Monday, April 1st. We're also going to be visiting Arlington, Texas on April 1st. And we have 2 sessions both of those days, a morning session from 8:30 to 11:30, and then an afternoon session from 1 to 4. Finally, we'll be having a session on April 15th here in Austin, again with those same 2 times, 8:30 to 11:30 and 1 to 4. You can also engage with us through our social media to provide answers to those 4 questions. So we've got opportunities online and in person. And we can't emphasize enough how important our strategic plan is guided by the input we get from you all. Once the strategic plan is complete, you'll be able to see it on our website. You can see our previous plans. And again, we're very excited. We thank you to everyone who's participated so far, and we look forward to further participation at our upcoming meetings. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that anyone has.
All right. Any questions of Mr. Bruno? Glad to see that Brian Francis is back with us. You
Yes,
said
sir.
it's for sure only until June the 1st or June the 30th?
At our previous commission meeting, it was decided that it would be an interim basis until June 30th, and the commission is currently undergoing its process to choose the next permanent executive director.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Any questions from anybody? Very good. There being none, thank you very much for your report, Steve. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you. Yes, sir. It's great to be with you.
Okay, moving on to item F of the agenda, discussion and possible recommendation of the proposed amendments to existing rules at 16 Texas Administrative Code, TAC Chapter 73, Paragraph 7310, 7326, and 7380, and new rules at 16 TAC Chapter 73, 110, and 73-111 regarding the electricians program. Doug, do I need to read the rest of that?
No, sir. We've got it from here.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to call on Doug Jennings then. Doug, you got the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Roach. Again, everyone, Doug Jennings, General Counsel for TDLR. Let me just start off by saying thank you so much for y'all being here today. We've got some big business to take care of today on some big bill implementation efforts, and just really appreciate your participation and your input. Saying this for our public who is watching, and potentially for some of the board members who haven't been following this issue. There was a pair of bills that passed the legislature and were signed by the governor last legislative session, aimed at increasing opportunities for licensure for students who take career and technology programs in high school and college. There was a bill, House Bill 1859, dealt with the air conditioning side. We had a board meeting yesterday where where the rules were approved for that, for implementation of that bill. And today we're talking about House Bill 1391 and the rules to implement it. And so what to know about House Bill 1391? I think you're probably aware that before the passage of House Bill 1391, there was one route and one route only to the residential wireman license. And that was earning 4,000 hours of on-the-job training under proper supervision, under the auspices of a licensed contractor, under the supervision of a master, etc. House Bill 1391 provided a second route to sit for that residential wireman exam, and that is completing what is called a career and technology program. Sometimes it's called career and technology education. Sometimes there's some different terms, but generally we use CTE as the shorthand to refer to that. And these are programs that are offered in high schools and colleges where the students learn not only theory about electricity or about heating and ventilation, air conditioning, but they also are provided with hands-on opportunities in the classroom, guided instruction, lab opportunities using equipment to simulate scenarios. So these are the types of programs we're talking about. House Bill 1391 and House Bill 1859 were both intended to serve as an alternate and different route to licensure. And so what House Bill 1391 says is that TDLR, us, is what we're here to discuss today, and our commission must adopt rules recognizing the essential knowledge and skills of a sequence of courses to be provided either in a high school or college setting that will provide a student with the proper training to be able to sit for the residential wireman exam and potentially become licensed as a residential wireman. So what we have done, several members of this group, along with some representatives from Texas State Technical College, some other educational institutions, got together, also help from Texas Education Association, got together to talk about the educational landscape in this CTE sphere. One of the things we were really hoping we wouldn't have to do, and it does appear that we didn't, is starting from scratch. So many years ago, TEA, Texas Education Association, and they have a governing body called the State Board of Education that is the one who makes the decisions about the rules. Those two entities got together. They got focus groups together. I'm not sure what the term that they use, but they got seasoned professionals like yourselves together to talk about and identify what skills and knowledge a student in one of these high school or college or high school programs, the kind of knowledge and skills that they should really focus on in order to make sure that they were producing students who are ready to enter the workforce. And so over a number of years, those were refined into rules that lay out the general criteria for 4 courses. And you'll hear me talk about these kind of throughout this presentation. There is a course called Principles of Construction that's intended to be 1 credit. And so if you, one quick note about credits, for the sake of this conversation, let's just think about a credit as being, if you attend a course every day for 2 semesters and you've passed all your classes and everything, you get 1 credit. So you could potentially take a course for 2 hours a day for 1 semester and get 1 credit. That's what we're talking about. And so Principles of Construction is what is an introductory course for students who want to enter a construction pathway, whether it's HVAC or electrical. And really, what that course does is teaches students the fundamentals. So we're talking basic calculations, we're talking basic workplace behavior, basic workplace safety, use of very common tools, maintenance of those tools, that type of thing. A big focus on safety. And then as a student, once a student takes that prerequisite course and decides where they want to focus, there are more focused electrical courses available. The first one is called Electrical Technology 1. That is a 1 credit course, which is, I like to say, the introductory deep dive. And so the student is going to have very hands-on instruction, learn how to use tools, learn how to perform, the basic methods, diagnostics, things like that. And then once they have established that knowledge, they move on to Electrical Technology 2, which is a 2 credit course. So that's we're twice as long, but it's still going to have that hands-on component. The students are going to be working on equipment. They're going to be doing real-life things just in the classroom. Once again, we would expect that all of these are taught under proper supervision, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And then the last component is what is called a practicum. And this is to get students out of the classroom. Even though we know that they have received substantial hands-on training in simulated conditions, there's no replacement for the real thing. And so students enter into an arrangement with their school and a local business where they either for pay or not for pay, it depends on the arrangement, will go and work, perform tasks, perform electrical work under the supervision of a licensed electrical contractor and master for that, for 2 hours a day, for example, if they want to get 2 credits. Some students choose to get 3 credits, and so they can make that potentially 3 hours a day. But it's aimed at making sure the students are getting out of the classroom and getting some real life experience, and honestly learning basic life skills, such as, getting acclimated to the fact that you're going to have to get up at the crack of dawn and be at a job site, things like that. Those things that will serve you very well later on in life. And if you don't learn them then, it's going to be tough. And so what our work groups that we got together to talk about with several members here is we looked at those rules from TEA that spelled out all of the essential knowledge and skills and evaluated those and tried to determine whether or not they contained proper instruction for someone who is going to come out and work as a residential wireman. And the good news was that we did identify these courses as providing the right essential knowledge and skills. One thing to know is that I'm going to use the term essential knowledge and skills. Think of that as an outline of the content a course has to cover, and that the skills and knowledge the student has to learn. It's different from a curriculum. So it's not saying, well, we've got to have 30 classroom hours on use of this particular tool, 40 hours talking about electrical hazards. It's an outline of all of the things that that the student needs to acquire, and it's up to individual schools to develop a curriculum which to cover all of those topics, to organize how that instruction is going to be performed. And so, circling back to House Bill 1391, what that bill does is it requires us to implement rules identifying the essential skills and knowledge of a student who is going to engage in one of these courses in a high school or a college setting. It is not intended to be an hour for hour equivalent to what has gone before. It is intended to be a different path. And so one of the things we'll probably talk about today, I anticipate us talking about today, and that we heard a public commenter talking about today, is that it doesn't provide this path, and these rules that we're asking you to publish don't amount to 4,000 hours. And that's absolutely true. But that is also the intent of the author. In fact, I spoke with Representative Bell, who's one of the authors of the bill, yesterday, and I was really pleased to hear when he said, that the rules that we're presenting before you today just perfectly capture, his interpretation or his desire of what the bill was intended to do. And so I just want to stress that once again, we're talking about different things. This is not a 4,000 hour path. It's not. And it was not intended to be. It's intended to be something different, to provide that focused hands-on education and also require work in the field as part of the educational program, not simply sitting in a classroom absorbing lecture, but I would say a progression, getting some classroom instruction, getting a little bit of lecture, putting that knowledge to use in a hands-on way, and then moving on and performing your practicum or your practical experience outside in real life work conditions. One of the other things the bill also asks us to do is to reward a student with academic credit for work that they perform outside of a school program. So for example, let's say that I'm a student and I don't have a lot of room in my schedule for electives. I've taken the principles of construction. I've taken the 2 focused electrical technology courses, but I don't have a lot of time left over for my practicum. So I'm only able to book 2 hours a day. And so at the end, I get 2 credits for that. Well, what if I work full time during the summer? Once again, assume that we're talking about under proper supervision through a licensed contractor and being supervised by licensed electricians, is providing a mechanism for a school to give a student that practicum credit for that work that's performed under proper licensure outside of the school program. And so those were the objectives of the bill. And as our public commenter noted earlier, these courses may be taught by a licensed master electrician, a licensed journeyman electrician, or a licensed residential wireman. Now, while I do understand there was some discomfort about that, I believe, and I won't speak for the author, I believe that was intended to help schools if they were having difficulty obtaining an instructor. But in our work group, the consensus, of course, was it would be great to have masters and masters and journeymen teaching these courses in particular, because they're the ones that are going to have that substantial real life experience and be much more familiar with codes, safety, you name it. And so that's where we are today. And so the rules, and I will walk through them with you in a minute. The rules implement House Bill 1391, which expects us, once again, to essentially recognize a sequence of courses that a student can reasonably complete in high school, that provides them with a pathway to sit for the residential wireman license exam. Of note is that these programs are also available to private high schools. It's not just public high schools. Also available to private high schools or to institutions of higher education, so colleges, universities. And the bill specifies that those programs may not be more stringent than what we adopt here today for essentially for high school programs. And that doesn't mean that a college or a private high school can't teach what they want to teach. It just means that if you're going to offer a program that is specifically targeted at, if I'm marketing a course and say, we have this sequence of 4 courses that you can take, and once you complete them, you can sit for the residential wireman exam. It has to meet these standards, but it doesn't impinge on the ability of another program to offer a journeyman or apprenticeship program. Doesn't affect that. It doesn't affect that at all. It's just if you're going to be able to tell your students that this is the result, that you will be eligible to sit for the residential wireman exam, your course, whether it's in a private high school or college, is also going to have to meet these standards. And we put one of the last rules we'll go over today just takes care of the mechanics of that. And what that private high school or college will need to do is submit a form to us, to the department, along with some course materials. Our education and examination team will review those and determine whether that program complies with our rules. And if so, we'll approve it. No further approval needed, no other fees, no paperwork needed. If not, we're going to provide that school with some guidance about why they're not in why their program doesn't comply and what they need to do. Once again, it was very important to us that we made this a one-time fee. We don't want to burden schools, with continued fees. We also don't want to burden them with continued paperwork, annual paperwork about this. We are, of course, however, going to ask them on an ongoing basis to provide us with information about their instructors, so we can make sure that they are licensed and that they hold the proper type of license to be engaged in that instruction. So that's the general overview for everyone and for the public. So before we dive into the rules themselves, does anybody have any questions for me that I can help answer?
Well done, Doug. That was a great presentation.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Roach. So what I'll do, not seeing any hands, and I'm about to go into presentation mode. So if you have a question, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, and Anna will call on you, and I'll stop what I'm doing and answer your question, but I just won't be able to see the hands. So I am about to share the rules, and we'll walk through them. So it always takes a second. And I will zoom in once I get it there. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. All right. So here are we'll walk through the rules, and the vast majority of the time will be spent on one of them. The rest of it is just conforming language for the most part. And so what we see here in definitions, we're simply providing a definition of a career and technology education program. And that's a phrase you will see littered throughout these rules. And that is one of these courses, one of these programs I was telling you about, where students receive that hands-on technical instruction. And all it says is, it's really just a repeat of what's in the statute, but we needed to make sure that term was in the rules. And we're just renumbering most of these rules because of that change, not changing any of these. And then we're also adding a definition for institution of higher education. And the very simple way of explaining that is it's a college, university, whether it's publicly funded, privately funded, independent, whatever. So it's just a college or university. And those are the only changes to the definitions. Everything else is just renumbering. On definitions, I'm getting down. All right. So 73.26, all this says is that if you have completed this course of training that we'll talk about, the sequence of courses, and you are applying to become a residential wireman through that CTE path, you just have to submit, you have to show the department that you completed that program, and that's going to require you to submit verification in a form acceptable to the department. That's typically going to be a transcript or a couple of transcripts. There is a possibility that a student could start this sequence of courses in high school, finish it in college. In that instance, we'd want to make sure that we got transcripts from both institutions. Sorry about that. This is a thing that happens. All right. So next would be fees. There is one new fee, and it is in relation to the process I mentioned a moment ago, where a private high school or a college, in order will need to request a determination from TDLR whether its program meets the standards that we have enumerated in rule. Once again, that is a one-time fee of $90. And a second potential fee change. This is required by House Bill 1391, and it would waive the license renewal fee for a master electrician, journeyman electrician, or residential wireman who provides proof that they were an instructor in a CTE course for at least one academic semester. I'd like to ask you permission to consider moving that up to an academic year, but we can talk about that later. Unless anyone has a strong opinion on it now, I'd be happy to hear it. All right, and so the centerpiece.
This is John Sparrow.
Yes, sir.
I have a quick question. Does the applicant have to submit and pay for a apprentice license, and go through the same relevant background checks in order to undertake the program? Obviously, if they're going to do a practicum and go out in the field and work on the job, is that portion of it waived, or do they still have to?
That they will not have to hold an apprentice license in order to work within the program. But if you're a student and you're seeking to do work outside of the school program, so you're seeking to do work after hours or in a summer job, you will have to hold that apprentice license. You will have to go through that criminal background check. And ultimately, even if you finish this sequence of courses, you apply to become a residential wireman and take that exam, we will perform that background check there as well.
So I guess the question really that I'm kind of thinking of is, if you do the practicum and you're working with a licensed electrical company under a master electrician and you're performing, say, a couple of hours a day to get your credit, aren't you still going to be going in people's houses and performing the same as what you would if you were an apprentice? So, is there not any exposure or risk to the companies, the program, and all the rest of it by not requiring them to do the background checks prior to that?
I'm bringing up the bill real quick, just if you don't mind. Exempt. Okay, so I'd like to focus. Can you see the statutory language?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So here in House Bill 1391, it does specify a student of any age is eligible to take the sequence of courses without being licensed under this chapter. This subsection does not authorize a person to perform electrical work without the appropriate license outside of a program described by this section. And so the way that we have read that is that there is not going to be that apprentice license requirement. One thing that we would definitely hope for, and maybe there's some room for improvement here, is the level of supervision that a student in a practicum must receive. And in fact,
Doug, I'm sorry to interrupt. It could be my screen. I'm not seeing the statute on the screen.
Oh, I changed back.
Okay, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. No problem. There are potentially, and I'm happy to open. Let me ask you, Mr. Sparrow, can we address that question in just a moment when I get down to the courses? Because I think
no problem. And
I think
I do see it. I've got the actual bill open too. I see what you're talking about. I should have read
okay. But I think, to me, it raises a very good question. And one of the things I'd like to do while we're here today is look to see in the actual the rule that we are referencing for the practicum to see what those requirements are. And maybe that will help us understand the level of supervision. And if not, then that's a potential area for improvement. So I'm very happy to look at that. So yeah, sure thing. And so here we are. The centerpiece of the rulemaking today is this career and technology education program requirements. And subsection A really is purely explanatory. It's just, if you're unfamiliar with what the department has been doing, is required to do by House Bill 1391, this spells it out. TDLR is required to establish standards for the essential knowledge and skills of CTE programs offered in public high schools, and then determine on a case-by-case basis whether those programs offered by private high schools and institutions of higher education are similar to programs that are offered in Texas public high schools. And so that's what these rules implement. And B is where we get down into the nitty-gritty. We start talking about those essential skills, those essential knowledge and skills. And so what we state is that a CTE program must be designed to ensure that students obtain the essential knowledge and skills set out in the following cross-referenced rules of the Texas Education Agency. And all that means is that the documents that actually contain those outlines, those essential knowledge and skills, are rules in another part of the Texas Administrative Code. And so we are, rather than copying and pasting pages upon pages upon pages of essential knowledge and skills, we're simply providing a citation to where you can find that information. And I've described generally what these programs are. So principles of construction is going to be a course it's a prerequisite for any construction track. It's going to be that very introductory knowledge, getting familiar with worksite safety, tools, maintenance of tools. Sorry, I'm getting a little hoarse, my apologies. Those things that really you need to have a firm understanding of before you move on to a more focused course. Electrical technology is where the student really starts getting that in-depth look at electricity, electrical theory, systems, equipment. That's where the hands-on instruction, there's some lecture, but the hands-on instruction really starts. Of course, this is in the classroom. And that's 1 credit. So just imagine, again, that's a student sitting through 2 semesters of 1-hour course. And then the student moves on to electrical technology 2, which is an even deeper dive, requires all of the advanced knowledge you acquired in the earlier course. And you build upon that, you learn more knowledge and skills, and you implement those again in a hands-on setting in the classroom. That's 2 credits. So 2 years of sitting, so that's 4 semesters of 1 hour a day, or 2 semesters of 2 hours a day. So that's 2 credits. And then the practicum in construction technology, this is the component I mentioned where a student will go and work outside of the school. They will leave the school and show up on a job site or at an office and perform work on behalf of a licensed professional. And what we have stated here, we've specified that in that practicum, at least 80% of a student's time in a practicum must be spent outside of the classroom and working under the supervision of a department licensed master electrician on behalf of a department licensed electrical contractor. And so we wanted to make sure that the proper supervision is noted there. And we wanted to make sure also not only supervision, but also licensed supervision. So someone who is licensed and we know that they are competent to supervise that person. And then also we included the 80%. It wasn't 100% performing work outside the classroom. And the reason is about 1 day a week, or 1 day every 2 weeks, I'm sorry. The student, the electrical contractor or the master, the student and that person will meet with school officials to talk about the student's progress, whether the student's been showing up on time, whether they've been performing the work adequately, how they've been faring generally. And keeping in mind that this is an academic credit, that is necessary. It is necessary to have that level of communication between the school, among the school, the student, and the business owner or the supervisor of the student. And then again, here in B, what we have stated is that a high school or institution of higher education, and that needs to be, yes, a high school, so that's public or private, or institution of higher education who is offering one of these programs must implement procedures allowing the student to earn course credit for work performed outside of the program. And I'm just going to scroll down here briefly. Under the supervision of a department licensed master electrician and on behalf of a department licensed electrical contractor. And again, this is what I mentioned to you. If you have a student whose schedule only allows them to complete two or three practicum hours while in school, this provides them the option to get academic credit for work that they have performed outside of the school summer job after hours. There are some existing processes that are used in the public high schools and some forms for other programs that the schools should be able to use here. And so they, they should be that framework should be in place. They're probably not going to have to build that, but we just wanted to make sure, and the bill requires, of course, that the schools do give academic credit for this work that's performed outside of the class. A couple of more. One thing I neglected to mention. I've mentioned hands-on instruction here for electrical technology 1 and 2. We have some guidelines here that students enrolled in those courses, electrical technology 1 and 2, must be provided hands-on practical instruction, including interactive lab work, for at least 80% of total classroom time. And that's an understanding that certainly theory needs to be taught. Students need to absorb it, but also a guideline. Our work group members were very concerned. They didn't want schools offering this program, online, right? Or in a place where students don't get that hands-on instruction or don't get enough. And so this is the guidance that we've provided to schools so they can help design their programs or tweak them as need be to give enough of that hands-on practical instruction. A few more items here. And so the C is required by the bill. We cannot recognize a CTE program unless it's instructed by a department licensed master electrician, journeyman electrician, or residential wireman. D is also taken directly from the bill. It says a CTE program offered by an institution of higher education may not be more stringent than a program offered by a public high school. Again, there are if a college or a private high school is going to offer a course of instruction and represent that the course ends with the student being eligible to sit for the residential wireman exam, that sequence of courses is going to have to meet our rules. Does not prevent them from offering other types of programs. And E is really where things come together. And it's really the understated provision that ties everything together. So the department will recognize a CTE program that's offered by a private high school or an institution of higher education if it complies with these rules. And what that means is if it's being taught by a department licensed master, journeyman, residential wireman, and the course utilizes the same essential skills and knowledge that we referenced above. And lastly, and I haven't forgotten about you, Mr. Sparrow, I'm going to look at the practicum in just a moment. Lastly, in F, this was a provision of the bill that the work group had many conversations about, but it is in the bill, it is law, and that hours spent completing a program may not be credited toward any on-the-job training required to apply for another type of license under this chapter. And so, practically speaking, that means there are pros and cons involved. It means that if you're a student and you're engaged in one of these programs, there is an understanding that you are not, once again, I mentioned there's an understanding that you're not getting 4,000 hours of experience. And so rather than saying, hey, you're a student, you've got your residential wireman, now we're going to give you 4,000 hours toward your journeyman, that's not workable in the eyes of the bill authors. And so what this is intended, it's intended to get these students through the program into the workforce and then allow them at that point to begin accumulating new hours toward a future license such as a journeyman. So I would like to, if you don't mind, Mr. Sparrow, I'd like to focus on your question about supervision. And so we've established, the bill provides that the student will not need to be a licensed apprentice to engage in this work or to perform that work in the practicum. I'm going to switch over to another document now. And please let me know if you can see what I'm looking at. Are you looking at the statute now? Just need one person.
No, we're looking at the meeting material still.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to start sharing a new tab in just a moment. I want to make sure I get it where I want. awkward sharing moments happen in every meeting. All right, so here we have the practicum setting, and these are very general. So this is real time. I'm scrolling through these. I haven't looked at this one in particular in a couple of weeks, and I just want to make sure. So you see that this is the practicum. This is the 2 credit that anticipates a student working outside of the school. Okay, I'm going to try to scroll through this. Okay, so what this requires is that the student acquire certain knowledge and skills. So they're explaining the role of an employee in the construction industry, demonstrating the critical thinking skills, basically workplace knowledge, and then develop a management plan for a project or activity. Really where we want to focus on here, I think this is particularly important here, is applying the appropriate codes, laws, standards, or regulations on their project, to document a project using the flow chart, to demonstrate critical thinking, costs, to apply mathematics, science, and knowledge to their activities, advanced tools, materials, processes, and procedures. And one of the things, so you'll note that this does not directly mention the level of supervision. And my feeling on that is this practicum is something, there's essential knowledge and skills, and it's a very general document that is used for a number of their different focused CTE programs where it's anticipated the student will go out and work. And that document needs to be flexible, so you could go work for an architect or work for an electrician. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were careful to include for this is that that the student be performing electrical work, not some theoretical thing. We could potentially specify that better in the rule, and that they're working under that proper supervision. What are your thoughts? And I'll start with you, Mr. Sparrow. About what are your ideas and thoughts about how or whether we need to specify the closeness of that supervision in a practicum? Because I'd be interested in this not only for the electrical program but also for another. Is it your thought that a student who is in a practicum needs to have personal supervision at all times, a more general form? What is your thinking?
I think my initial question was really kind of asking if they need to be licensed. I think the level of supervision is going to be whatever that master electrical or master licensed electrician and the company in which they operate under would deem necessary. I think just like any brand new apprentice, they're going to be kind of glued to someone's hip and not getting to do a whole lot, but more observing and with the gradual implementation of skills and, starting with very basic stuff, not life safety type things. And then, gradually improving as they go along. I think there's some other, good courses in the high schools right now that do cover some of the concerns of life safety, whether it's a firefighting course or EMT course and things like that. There's the classroom part of the theory, and then there's also the practical. But on the practical, I think my question really was, and maybe it's down to the electrical contractor, just like any other employer, if you've got folks operating under your license, and I don't know, there's folks on this board that own their own companies and may feel strongly or differently about it. But if you got somebody operating and going into your customers' homes and things like that, then that's why I brought up the background checks and that type of stuff. And so, as an electrician, if you've got a license, then the background check has been performed and kept up to date. If you've now got a kid in high school with all the best intentions, but maybe has been in trouble, you don't know the guy from Adam, you don't know the guy or girl and what their background is. So to send them in with a licensed residential wireman to go perform some simple stuff, I think you need to make sure that probably, I would imagine that those folks are, you know, with good standing before you go send them into somebody else's home. And maybe they don't get to do that. You know, I think that's just something that most folks out there, especially who are going to, you know, implement these kids or students on their programs or under their licenses, would want to have some kind of, I guess, just kind of security or peace of mind that's been done. As far as the supervision, again, I think that's just kind of, I don't think there's any difference in the level of supervision from a brand spanking new apprentice electrician versus, you know, a student on this program. I think it's a gradual implementation of skills and responsibilities as they go through, and based on how quickly they can learn individually. So
That's a great point, Mr. Sparrow, and I appreciate you raising, you know, the initial question and this further discussion. You know, I do see, I agree with you that I do see a risk for, you know, I think a business owner when they take on a student in a practicum, you know, that is a calculated risk, right? It's you need some help. You've got this opportunity to provide that help, but you want to make sure that you're tailoring that work so you're complying with the code and that person has adequate supervision. That's a big concern. Mr. Allen, got your hand up.
Thank you. So I kind of feel the same way about the licensing on that. I think they need to go ahead and get it when they're in school. That way, you know that they can do the work, and it doesn't come up that they wasted their time. That's what they will think, that they wasted their time taking these classes and then they can't do the work.
Right. And you know what? One of the things that we've talked about here, and I neglected to mention, Mr. Allen, is that it sounds to me, based on what I've heard, that schools are going to encourage their students to pursue an apprentice license anyway. And one of the reasons is because there is still, you know, despite the fact that there's this provision in the bill that says you cannot get credit toward future licensure for work performed in the program. Let's imagine a student who is able to fulfill all of the requirements that we're trying to adopt today, and they're able to finish that in high school, but still wants to go work a summer job, wants to work after hours. As a licensed apprentice, they'll be able to accumulate those hours towards future licensure, those things that are clearly outside of the program. And so that would be a huge, you know, incentive to hold that license.
Yeah, it would. Well, just basically kind of because of regular apprentices, they have to have a license for so many years before they can take the test. Okay.
Right.
Have to have that apprentice license. The one other thing that I have a question on is the hours and the credit. I wish there was some way someone could tell me that one credit equals 100 hours.
Right.
Or something like that. So I could determine the 4,000 hours, and surely I would think they could deserve some credit for the time in class, but a number, I guess.
And I'll be happy. We've got a couple other hands, and I'll be happy to get back with you on that one here in just a second, Mr. Allen.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Webb.
Yeah, Doug, are you good for general comments right now, or you got some moments at the end of this?
Yeah, we absolutely do. If you have a question about, I mean, fire away. I mean, we've covered the majority of it.
So right now you're good for general comments?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So really, for me right now, I can't back this program at all. It's got so many flaws to it. For one, half the bullet items in the curriculum don't even really pertain to electrical. It's more project management, scheduling. Those guys will never see that residential. And for these guys to try to get 2 hours of working, so as a residential, I mean, it's service calls. As a business owner, I'm not scheduling my technicians out in the field to pick up an after work student to make a service call. And all he's going to do is just look and see what the guy's doing. Unless he gets into a brand new home being built again, he's just going to do rough stuff. Because every house is different. 1 story, 2 story, 200 square feet, you know, to 5,000 square feet. Different requirement, different requirements with pools. And now we're starting to add in solar and EV chargers. So there's a lot going on. And our job is to protect the public, right? And I just can't see giving these guys a go ahead to work in people's home after bare minimal.
Understood. And that's one of the things that that's been very much in this discussion. I anticipate more of it today, and that we've had in the work groups is, what's the proper balance? Recognizing that House Bill 1391 tells us you've got to recognize a program that a high school student can complete in high school. You've got to recognize a program they can reasonably complete, and when they're done with that program, they can sit for that license. And it was that bill is what we're implementing, and we frankly we don't have a choice. And so it's like, how do we strike that balance, recognizing the law tells us we have to adopt a program that a student can complete in high school. What is that balance? And so, but I hear you loud and clear. And Mr. Lundgren, go ahead.
Stacy Mighty.
Yes.
I wanted to know, how did we determine, or it was determined that 2 hours is the most practical time slot, and is there any leeway around that to kind of aggregate the hours into like a 4 hours, so it's similar to a half day, so that the student could get more time like on the job site?
Okay, happy to answer that question. So I'm going to bring up the rules real quick so I can walk through this with you. So as I mentioned, one of the things that we did as a work group is look through the existing course offerings by Texas Education Agency. And so you'll see that Principles of Construction, that course is a 1-credit course. Similarly, Electrical Technology 1 is a 1-credit course. Electrical Technology 2 is 2 credits. And so the reason we landed on 1 credit for these two, and then 2 credits for this course, is that's just how they have been designed by TEA and their parent board. What we did for the practicum, there is it looks like a student in any kind of construction track program in a public high school who offers these programs will take 2 or 3 hours of a practicum. So once again, that's the component where you're outside of the classroom, working under a contractor. The general feeling was, if we just cut this program off and we just said, you've got to take Principles of Construction and these 2 courses, classroom courses, that wasn't sufficient. That the work group members wanted to make sure that students were getting that appropriate outside the classroom, real life experience, but that somehow that 2 credits, imagine yourself working, for that contractor 2 hours a day for a year, just wasn't sufficient. Not only because it's not sufficient training, but also from a practical standpoint. And Mr. Webb mentioned something like this a minute ago. Imagine that you've got a student who's working for you and they're only available 2 hours a day. They may not even have time to go out on a call or to perform a certain project. And so what we wanted to do, imagine you're a high school student. I think in order to graduate high school, you have to complete 28 credits. 22 of those are already spoken for by required courses. So you've got a little room for electives. And so what we were trying to do is kind of work within those confines. The work group didn't feel that 2 hours a day was nearly enough. And so we doubled it. And 4 credits is really, from my understanding, is really stretching the bounds of what we can reasonably expect a high school student to be able to find time for in their schedule. But we pushed it to this point because of the work group members and the board members' insistence that these students, while they're in this program, get as much outside the classroom experience as possible. And so that's how we landed on those values.
So it is 4 credits, 4 hours per day?
Yes, it is 4 credits for the outside the classroom component. Yes.
Okay, but the work is 4 hours and not 2?
It can be arranged any number of ways. So imagine your typical explanation of what a credit hour would be. Let's just say that for a 1 credit course, that just means I took the course the first semester and the second semester and passed, right? So each semester is essentially half a credit. Particularly for these practicums and these the more advanced Electrical Technology 2 course, a student's not going to be taking, for example, Technology 2. They're not going to be taking that class 1 day a year for 2 years. they're going to, that class is typically going to be double booked. So they take a 2-hour course for a year, right? There is a world in which they could take a 4-hour class a day for a semester. Probably isn't going to work out that way. And there are some things I'm gonna recommend that we change to these rules to kind of clarify some of these things we're talking about. But 4 credits would. One way that would work is that a student works 4 hours a day for a contractor for a full year. You probably couldn't. There's no way of being able to squish that into one semester because you wouldn't get to go to school. You'd be working 8 hours a day, and so a student could stretch this out potentially over 2 years or 3, 1.5 years, with different number of hours dedicated. It's just that you want to get to 4 credits, and how you kind of put that together is the student needs to. They may have 2 hours in their schedule available, or 4. They just work with the school to kind of design that. And keeping in mind that we've had some questions about credits and rules, one of the suggestions I was going to make, and this seems like a good time, is rather than state, 1 credit, is to perhaps state, the number of semesters a student needs to be engaged in that instruction. So we could say, we could provide options. We could say, 1 hour a day for one full academic year, 2 hours a day for a semester, that kind of thing. So students aren't, and schools aren't able to really shorten the length of these courses to provide some firm guidelines. So for example, electrical technology 2, I think we would probably prefer a student not take 1 hour a day for 2 years, but take 2 hours a day for a full year, right? Get that focused, more in-depth time. Because when you think about these hands-on courses, there's setup time, there's cleanup time, that can eat some of those hours. And if you're going in, to this advanced course for an hour a day, that's going to eat up some of that time. So we may want to structure them a little differently. And I'd definitely be open to structuring it, the practicum portion also differently. So rather than saying 4 credits, saying something else potentially about, at least 2 hours a day for a year, something like that.
Yes, Stacy, I think that would be helpful, especially when it comes to practicum. It's comparing academic credits to actual working hours. So
Right.
There may be some type of table conversion of what that looks like for the student. That would be helpful, I think, at least to me.
Okay. We can definitely talk about that. I've gotten some feedback here in the last few minutes, and I just want to just share it real quick because it addresses some of the things we were talking about. I've gotten a note, you cannot work per OSHA regulations in a dangerous occupation under 18 years of age unless the practicum is an internship, which requires direct supervision and a written job description. And so only a sophisticated employer would employ those students, and the employer would typically do background checks and understand the risk of employment with a minor. And so I just wanted to give a little extra detail there. So let me just ask your suggestions, and so Ms. Mighty and also others. When we're talking about 1 credit versus semesters, that kinds of thing, how do we feel about that? Do we feel? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you feel that, for example, electrical technology 2, we should specify that it must be 2 hours a day for an academic year, or if we should just simply leave it at credits. I want to make sure that your preferences are expressed as much as we can here.
If I were in a lab in high school, as a matter of fact, and for electrical technology too, I would state that 0.5 credit for the classroom and maybe 0.5 for the lab, so that you could understand that it's a 2-hour course, right?
Okay.
And which you could have it that way. For the practicum, I would give it a table 0.5 credits, right, per semester, because that's what students are used to, is equivalent to X amount of work hours.
Okay. And I think we'd have to, I think some further work may need to be done to pin down, what we, how that translates, number of work hours to number of credit hours.
Yeah, I have a teenager in high school now, so I'm just copying and
Yeah.
that's something that they do.
I do too.
Yes, so thank you.
Okay, sure thing. I'm gonna stop presenting just briefly and see, do we have hands? Mr. Lundegreen. You're muted, sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. Marcus Lundegreen. Really, whether we call it credit hours or semesters, it's not going to change the time or their exposure to the electrical industry. Kim Allen was asking about how many hours equivalent it is. From my calculations, in Texas high schools, the typical credit course is designed to meet a full school year to earn 1 credit, like Doug said. Given that Texas requires 75,600 operational minutes per school year for high schools, and assuming that there's an even distribution of instructional time across all the courses, 1 credit course usually meets for a portion of the operational minutes. High schools operate different schedules, such as traditional block, modified block schedules, etc. So you can't really get an exact number for all schools, but for a rough estimate, assuming that the student's taking 7 courses in a traditional high school schedule, 75,600 minutes divided by 7 is 10,800 minutes per course. We're looking at 8 courses here, and multiplying that out, it's 1,440 hours roughly, split between classroom instruction and hands-on training versus the traditional 4,000 hours actually doing the work. Nationally, there's many electrical apprenticeship programs that are registered with the Department of Labor. They provide college credit, and they have no effect on the required experience to sit and test for a journeyman or a master electrician license. My 4-year apprenticeship involved instruction each week for 4 years. I received 30 hours of college credit. It didn't substitute any of the 8,000 hours, nor should it have. Where I learned everything was the 8,000 hours doing the work. And while we've tried to include as much of the hands-on training as possible with the requirements from this bill, planning these draft rules, the constraints that are imposed by high schools, and needing to meet the additional general requirements, general education, it's not comparable.
Thank you, Mr. Lundegreen. And I just wanted to say that 1,440 hours, that is what I had concluded as well. And I just wanted to let you know that, we do recognize that. And I one of the things that, that I wanted to stress is, what the bill does is I believe that it recognizes that disparity. Now, obviously, there are differing opinions about the bill itself. I do understand that, and yes, that's part of the challenge, right? That is part of the challenge is recognizing that students are, they're in high school for 4 years and they've got to complete a lot of other tasks. And so, one of the things we did, that I took great care when drafting these rules is about recognizing that concern about not simply providing students with, go get your 2 hours of practical experience and that'll be enough, but understanding that, I think we had a commenter earlier mention about things that go boom. We're talking about electricity, we're talking about fire risks, we're talking about electrocution risk, we're talking about safety. To provide them with as much of that hands-on instruction within the confines of the high school experience or college experience as possible. And so, yes, and that's what we're here to do today, is to try to identify that balance, and it can be tough. There's no question. One last thing I'm going to share again. Is the last rule, and it's really pretty mechanical. And what it just says is it lays out the groundwork for a private high school or institution of higher education that wants to offer one of these programs. It's just what I mentioned before. They must submit a request, provide some copies of course materials for our team to review, pay that one-time $90 fee. And they have B is a continuing obligation, although a school does not have to pay this $90 fee every year or file paperwork every year. When there's a substantial change to the program, they have to notify us. One of the things I'd like to ask for your permission to change is to include notifying us of a change in an instructor, so we can make sure that a licensed instructor is teaching at all times. And then C and D just provide that if we find a program is not being taught by a licensed instructor, or somehow the program is not offering enough practical credit, for example, we can refuse to recognize that program moving forward. And so that part really deals with, behind the scenes, how we actually implement all of this. Mr. Webb.
Hey, yeah, Doug, thanks, Pro Webb. Hey, I'd really like to waive that $90 fee for them to initiate this program in the high schools, right? If we're looking to try to create more jobs, I shouldn't be penalizing the high schools and have to do it. They were getting our tax money anyhow, so.
Right. Okay. Noted. And one of the things that that we talked about when coming up with that is what's the anticipated kind of actual expenditure of hours we're going to have for our employees, because this is new work, right? And so I'll certainly take that back to the team. I certainly will.
Have we addressed everything for John Sparrow? We're going to come back to it.
No, we're good, Mr. Roach. Thank you.
You're good? Okay, this is some very interesting discussion that has gone on, and I think some additional revelations that maybe not had previously been considered. One of the things that has stuck out for me in all of this is that through all of this, there is no removal of the responsibility of the master electrician to be responsible for the work performed by the kids enrolled in this program who are working under his license, correct?
Correct.
So it's not like we're sending some kid out on his own and are allowing for the sending some kid out on his own to go perform some wiring and calling it legal and not having somebody, not removing the responsibility of the master electrician to ensure that everything is installed correctly.
True.
All right. And one of the issues here, guys, whether how strongly you feel about this program, I think it's important to point out, remind everybody that this is not House Bill 1391 has been moved through the legislature and it has passed. It is a law. And so the responsibility that we basically are tasked with is not if, it's how. We have to figure out a way to implement this program, not if we want to implement it or not. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So I know it's a bit of an arduous task, and I think one of the important things to remember, this successful completion of the high school course does not grant a license. It only grants the ability to sit and take the test. Did I state that correctly, Doug?
Oh, yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. Still got to pass the test. And I think in some of the previous discussions that we've had, it's been pretty thorough. Any work that is wanting to be performed by this student outside of residential would require the acquisition of a apprentice license. you can't do anything but residential under this program. So if there was concerns about, how far reaching would be the work that this high school kid could be exposed to, anything beyond residential, he would be required to get that license, and then John, he would become subject to the background check rules and everything else that applies to an apprentice license. I hope it made sense.
Yes, sir.
I think we need to be cognizant that the legislature, they do things for us, and we need to figure out a way to make sure that we implement the things that they're wanting us to do. With that said, has anybody got anything else that they would like to bring up? You guys have brought up some great questions, made some great points. I don't mean to sound condescending or judgmental or anything, but like I said, this is whether you are individually in favor of the law or not, is that ship has sailed. It's a law, okay? And you could bring up that argument possibly in the next legislative session, which starts Jan 2025. But for now, we've got a job to do, and we need to figure out how to do it.
And just adding on that, Mr. Roach, Doug Jennings, General Counsel, is, this has generated a lot of discussion, and I just as part of the process, I think it's very helpful, Mr. Roach, what you've explained. There's a task that we have to perform, that our department is required to perform. And if the law gets changed to address some of your concerns, then we'll implement that too. And so I just urge all of you, whether you're 100% fan of this, of House Bill 1391, or whether you have issues with it, is to make your voices heard and reach out to your legislators. Mr. Allen. Yes, sir.
So thank you, Kim Allen. I wanted to thank Marcus. His words were really good on that apprenticeship program stuff about the 180 hours, and we didn't get any credit for it. So my question might be, do they have to get credit to take these courses to be able to take that residential wireman, or is that just a perk to do it? I guess that's my question.
I just want to make sure I understand your question. Could you repeat it? I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that I'm answering it properly.
So the credit that they're getting, I don't really understand the hours wise on it, but at the end of this course, do we have to give them the 2,000 hours so they can go ahead and take the residential wireman after they have another 2,000 hours?
No,
right?
This is actually, so the way this works is even though we've had a discussion of how many actual hours go into this, because we're trying to figure out in real life, what the equivalent is. Hours are really not part of this consideration. So as long as, our rules that we're adopting, as they're going to recognize the length and type of instruction that a student must receive in order to become eligible to take the residential wireman exam. They don't, the student is not accumulating hours in the traditional sense. So the student is simply finishing that course and then becoming eligible. They're not awarded hours. They're specifically, actually, the bill says they're not awarded hours. So when a student engaged in one of these programs, when they come out, assuming they pass the residential wireman license exam, unless they have performed work outside of the program that as an apprentice, they'd come out at 0 hours. So they would have this new license, but start at 0. And so that's kind of but that was specifically provided in the bill. And, I see it as a pro and con. It's a recognition that you may not be receiving, 4,000 hours of on-the-job training, but you are obtaining a fair amount, a good amount of classroom, lab, practical, and field experience. But striking that balance was not rewarding. We're not awarding those, specific number of hours to someone who graduates from one of these programs.
Okay. All righty. Thanks.
Sure thing.
Good question, Kim.
Mr. Webb.
Thanks for that explanation, Mark. May not be happy with it, but it is what it is. It's law. But I wish it would have came before the group so we could have this discussion prior, but that's most unsettled. So talking about the teacher. So a residential wireman continue, correct?
Yes, a licensed residential wireman would be able to instruct the course, yes.
And then how does we generate the curriculum? How do we know exactly what he's teaching? We give bullet points, right? But is
Yeah,
there
we give the essential knowledge and skills. Yes, that's right. And then the school would develop the curriculum, school district.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Sparrow.
Yeah, Doug, John Sparrow. I think, a lot of the discussions that we've had before on the hours and kind of how they are structured for an apprentice electrician is sometimes there's no set or given curriculum that an apprentice electrician has. And I know we've had this kind of long discussion, albeit a few years ago, with this board about, apprentice electricians. In some cases, some of these folks are doing 3,000 hours and all they've done is dug trenches and ran conduit. They haven't had a ton of practical experience actually running wires in new homes, existing homes, or even on service. And so there are some obviously really good firms out there that have a good structured program for their apprentice electricians and bring them through that process, to kind of learn as much as they can. They're investing in their future and their company's future. But not every apprentice electrician out there with 4,000 hours has demonstrated necessarily all of the skills and all of the requirements. If you read the curriculums here on some of the stuff, on the level 2, there's a lot of demonstrated requirements that each of the students has to perform. And so I'm not saying that certainly will kind of take the place of solid hours out in the field with some of these apprentices that they do. But we all see it. There are apprentice electricians out there that don't have and have not even had the opportunity to demonstrate some of these opportunities or requirements. And so, is there a test at all on this curriculum where they do have to demonstrate? I know there's check boxes, but do they have a practical test, for instance, in the curriculum? And I know some of you guys have been through these programs, and I'm sure there are tests that you guys have performed, whether you're only getting the 30 credit hours or whatever that is. But, a demonstrating your knowledge or your understanding of the knowledge along with practical requirements in the field. At the end of the day, you've got to pass the test. The test is not changing for a residential wireman on a guy who comes through this program or a guy who's done, 2 years of digging trenches and running conduit. You've still got to prepare. You've got to practice. You've got to demonstrate the knowledge to pass the test. Looking at the pass and fail rates, it seems like our testing criteria is pretty high. And it's not a given that you're just going to walk in the testing center and pass that thing. So I think the guys on this panel and on this board who've been through it themselves, albeit, quite a while ago for some of your folks, it's a continuing, it's an industry of continuing education and constant learning. And it really just depends on your mentor or your supervision, as opposed to, you can throw 10,000 hours out. It doesn't matter if you spend 5 years digging trenches and running conduit, you don't know anything. And so I'm not saying that's all they do, but that discussion has came up many times on this board. And I just wonder if all of that has actually been taken into account when we're kind of thinking about it, and which is the best way to ensure that they're best prepared to become, an electrician in the industry, which is obviously a serious, position to have.
Doug, before you answer that question, Mark Roach, I got to ask John. John, if I heard you correctly, there's a you're recognizing that there is a distinction between the training or education that would take place outside of this program defined in 1391 versus going through the process under 1391 in school, in the high school or the private school, wherever the course is taught, with the essential skills and knowledge requirements and so on and so forth. I would think the rigor between the two different scenarios is 180 degrees, probably different. Doug, correct me if I'm misstating this, but any student going through the program under TEA, administered in any of our public schools or approved private schools, would certainly come under a testing rigor to and would have to pass. You don't just, I don't think this is not a course where you just take it for 2 years and you're good to go. You have to pass the course. You don't pass the course, you don't sit for the exam. Correct, Doug?
Yes, and the standard is you really have to demonstrate your comprehension of those essential skills and knowledge, and be provided the opportunity to demonstrate your mastery, or at least competency. So yes, so not only will there be testing, for each individual course or multiple times, then there at the end of that academic journey, there's also the TDLR residential wireman exam as well. So many checks along the way. It's not something you'll be able to proceed upon if you haven't obtained those skills and knowledge.
Does that help, John? Did we address it?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think my point is just, in the electrical industry are very critical of ourselves. And I know that the hours as a apprentice electrician has came up many times, and what they actually do and what they're actually taught does not have a lot of control. It really all comes down to, the company and the master electrician in which they work for and what duties they've actually had the opportunity to perform. I think, you just answered my question. That was really my question. Are they tested? Are they held accountable and have to demonstrate these items? Because, I'm sure everybody here knows an apprentice electrician that's probably been working in this industry for 2 years or more and really does not have the type of skill set that, is listed out here and be able to perform every one of those tests or any one of those functions on that list. And so, I think while it's not ideal, it is a way to bring more licensed and qualified electricians to the industry. I think the concern is obviously how much practical experience they've got. It should be a big concern, but you guys sitting here may feel fully confident that anybody under your licensure and under your supervision is more than adequately prepared after 2 years to go take the test. I don't think that that's the case for the 100,000 or so apprentice electricians out there that currently hold a license in Texas. So this at least gives you some comfort in knowing that they're going to pass at least and demonstrate a basic understanding of what you would expect from any of your apprentice electricians. So that was just the point I was going to make.
Yeah, and that's a great point, John. Mark Roach again. That's a great point because it becomes one of, I guess, from the business side, the master deciding I ain't got time, right? And it's going to cost me money, whatever, versus an instructor under the program. That's exactly what he's getting paid to do, is educate. Did I make sense with that? The difference?
Yeah, for sure.
I think, I don't mean to speak for Representative Schaefer, but I will. I think I've mentioned to you guys before, I was part of the team that put House Bill 5 together back in 2013 that put SHOP, back in the public schools. If you recall, there was a period of time where it just basically disappeared. And I think our leadership in Texas was wanting to push our educational processes to equal that of maybe California, the Silicon Valley, and the high-tech industry and whatnot. And the rigor changed. They went into the 4x4 program where these kids were going through high school and hitting a wall, educational wall, so to speak, where they felt hopeless. They felt that, in the end, they weren't going to be able to get into college. And so the alternative, unfortunately, for many of them was to drop out. And we worked very hard on getting the legislature to consider passing House Bill 5, which put CTE back in the public education system. However, the law did not mandate that public education do that. It simply provided the avenue for public education to do that. And then it became incumbent upon industry to put the pressure on the school districts to reinvigorate the program. And it worked very successfully. I don't know, y'all probably, you pick a school that you're aware of and they've got a CTE program in it now that didn't exist prior to 2013. One of the things that we did not even consider, we just didn't think about it at all, the latent effect of our efforts, was the huge drop in the dropout rate. These kids now, because of endorsements that you can have on your diplomas, had hope again to be able to start high school and finish it. They have a path. And this program, I think, was in the front of Representative Schaefer's thinking to get this thing passed. It's another step, I feel like, to incentivize kids to come out with some kind of a skill, some level of skill. And I'm not sure why he selected the residential wireman program, but it helps the electrical industry in the long run. And with that, I'll shut up and let anybody shoot holes in it or whatever you would like to write your comments.
Well, just to get this out there, I do expect there will be more discussion. I just wanted to let you know that the request today would be to go ahead and publish these rules for a 30-day comment period. We would then bring the comments back to you and further refine the rules as needed with your help. The one thing I would like to ask your permission to do is when you approve to publish is to give us a little leeway on redrafting a couple of provisions, not different than the substance we talked about, but just perhaps rewording. So for example, rather than using, 1 credit to maybe, to give a little greater detail, maybe we're talking about, 2 semesters rather than something that can be done in 1 semester. Those kinds of things to kind of give some more specific guidance to the schools. And I think I think those changes would be confined to those kinds of things.
I think some of those points that you just made there, Doug, are the result of the discussion that you guys have presented today.
Right.
Great points.
Doug, this is John Spire again. I think one last thing on the credits. I think it is important to understand what that actually looks like. I know the discussion that you guys had earlier with Patricia is important, just to make sure. I don't know that you tie it to a semester, but what an actual 1-hour class per semester equates to, whether that's a half a credit. So, a lot of the skills in the CTE programs do back to back so that they can get a better understanding for the students on a 2-hour period or an 1.5-hour period, as opposed to just 1 hour at a time. So I would just caution not to restrict it or get too specific about how many semesters, but more what the credit equivalent per semester is.
Okay, great point. Great point. And
That is a
and
very good point, John. Very
duly
good
noted.
point.
Thank
And I
you for
think, and Doug brought it out in the discussion, you know, we're not in the classroom. We're not teachers, and that's probably, I know for me, that's probably a good thing for the students that I'm not in there teaching the class. But one of the things that I've learned being on the school board down here in Gregory Portland ISD is I think we took it for granted when we were students, when we were kids in high school ourselves. But when you look at the time constraints for the educational process in the classroom for any course, you have the kids in that classroom for X amount of minutes, or you know, an hour or an hour and a half. That I think that some of the schools have gone to now on certain days. And the time that it takes to get everybody in there, to get everybody settled down, to get the roll called and do all those kinds of things. And then the time at the end of the class to close the class out so that all the procedures and steps and everything are taken care of. What is the net educational time that they're actually learning something, right? And so, you know, if in the case of an hour, it may only be 45 minutes, you know, so, and that's a critical thing. Where, you know, especially where this course is concerned, as far as we're concerned, when this course is concerned. So,
Mr.
anyway,
Roach,
I'm
John,
glad you pointed that out, Doug.
Mr. Roach, John Sparrow, I think that's a great point, and I think it applies to all parts of it. How many hours does an apprentice electrician spend driving between jobs?
Right.
In the morning, and what's the practical hours on? I think that's probably one of the reasons that it is 4,000 hours. If not, again, I know the industry for a long time wanted 6,000 hours. And, you know, I think there's a portion of everything that they do where they have to demonstrate the learning that they've got or that they've had. And I think if the emphasis is on demonstrating the learning, at least it's not just a check in the box, and then they can take a test that they may be very good at testing, and then they're out in the field, you know, with a residential wireman's license, and potentially be causing a lot of major problems to themselves or others. So I think if as long as that, I feel like the emphasis has got to be on demonstrating the knowledge, just like in a test, but, you know, maybe practically, then, you know, at least we can reduce the amount of collateral damage that potentially could happen from not getting the full 4,000 hours.
Actually, yeah, exactly, John. That is exactly right. And the beauty of this program is that they don't get to sit for the test just because they sat through the course. They've got to pass. They have to pass the course in order to move on. Anybody else? Yeah, you guys have done a great job today. I'm really always impressed with the level of thinking that goes on. Doug, anything else?
Not from me. You know, happy to answer any more questions. I would just, you know, we can continue to discuss the discussion. I would just, you know, I'd ask if we feel like there's no more discussion required right now, I'd just ask if for a motion to publish. At which point, you know, remember we'll have a second board meeting. We'll have another board meeting, most likely in June, to discuss those comments.
Right.
Mr. Londegreen.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Can we wait for a motion to publish until we've seen what all changes you're going to add to it?
For timing purposes, I mean, in theory, we could. I'd like to ask that if possible, maybe I work with Mr. Roach or something, or maybe the work group, to try to hammer out those changes rather than kind of convening a whole new meeting, because we're just on some pretty firm deadlines to have these, you know, to be able to bring these to you in June.
Right. Now, and Marcus, that you know, it's a good point, but the approval being asked for today is simply to publish, not to recommend final approval.
And my thinking, Mr. Lundgren, is that if we go ahead and publish, and even if we publish some language that isn't particularly ideal, as long as we don't change the rule draft to make it impose additional burdens, we don't have to start this process all over again. So I think there's a path for us to get where we want to go between now and the next meeting if we publish today, or if we vote to publish today.
And anybody can comment during that period. All of us guys sitting on this board, we're not prevented from putting in our 2 cents.
This is Mark Matheny. I'd like to make that motion to publish.
Very good. I have a motion to approve publishing. Do I have a second?
This is Stacy Mighty, I second.
Stacy Mighty, a second. Any further discussion? Then I'll call the question. Anna, roll call for the vote.
Yes, sir. Stacy Mighty,
Aye.
Marcus Lundergreen,
Nay.
John Sparrow,
Aye.
Roy Webb,
Nay.
Mark Matheny,
Aye.
Lydell Toy,
Aye.
Kim Allen,
Nay.
and presiding officer Mark Roach.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-3.
So just in case anybody's wondering here, the work's not finished. It's actually probably, Doug, good representation. It's just beginning.
Well, we're going to, what this publication gives us is that opportunity to get that feedback from people in the industry, from educators, and really help us identify if there are any gaps here and better ways of addressing some of the things we talked about today. Once again, my goal is to, sometimes we publish rules that we expect to finish the process looking exactly the same, right? With these, I think the rules are I think what we've got so far is a very fair implementation of House Bill 1391 with some things that we've identified that we might want to improve upon. And so that's just we're going to try to find that balance through some of those small improvements moving forward.
And I'm gonna encourage each one of the board members, if you don't know any of the members of your local school board, meet them and make your voice heard with them as well. Make them aware about what you're working on through this board for this program that's gonna hit their schools, and give your thoughts to them as well. Anything else? All right, then we'll move on to agenda item G, recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting.
We will definitely be taking this up. But if there are any other topics, we're happy to hear them.
First on the list, right? Marcus, Kim,
I don't have anything.
Heather, Troy, anything that you guys want to make sure gets on the next agenda? Anything from a review perspective? Anything that you want presented specifically of course of action that's been taken from this meeting to the next?
Kim Allen, I do not.
Please know if y'all have anything that y'all think of between now and the next meeting, you can just give me a call, shoot me an email, and we'll talk about it with our staff to get it onto the next agenda.
Very good. All right. Moving on then to item H, discussion of date, time, and location of the next board meeting.
Sure, I'll jump in real quick, Mr. Roach, if you don't mind. Doug Jennings, General Counsel. Texas State Technical College has reached out to us. Texas State Technical College, as you may be aware, in both House Bill 1859, which was the air conditioning program, and House Bill 1391, which is the one we've been talking about today, required TDLR and our work group to consult with TSTC in developing these standards. We've done that. Their representatives have been part of this process. They have offered us an opportunity to meet in person, to have your next meeting in person at their campus in Waco. It is their biggest campus. It's where they do a lot of hands-on training and education, the likes of which we're talking about today. And so they'd love to be able to, perhaps in the morning, for those of you who are able to attend, take you on a tour, show you the education the students are receiving, show you their facilities. And then also what's beneficial about June 10th and 11th, those 2 dates they've identified, is that high school counselors from all over the state are going to be at that location for a conference. And so it would be a great opportunity for the members to talk to those counselors about these educational programs, about the options and paths available to students. And so we'll reach out to you after this meeting to see if you're interested in attending that. And if we get enough interest, we'll certainly take TSTC up on that. The good thing is they've also got a public meeting room, and it's very well equipped. So anyone who can't attend in person would still be able to attend virtually like we are today. If we don't have enough interest to attend in person on one of those days, we're looking at a meeting probably beginning of June would probably be ideal, but beginning to middle of June.
I think that's a great offer. Great offer. Anything else?
Not for me.
Okay.
Quickly, if I may, Mr. Chairman, someone noted I may have incorrectly stated the date of the Houston Strategic Plan meeting. It is easy to remember. It is April 15th, tax day. And again, that information's on our website. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr.
Allen.
Kim Allen. Mr. Chairman, if I would like to give a big shout out for Jerry Daniels, retired Chief Electrical Inspector for the great state of Texas. If he's listening, have a happy retirement, long and happy retirement, and thank you for everything you've done for the great state of Texas.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
I
Allen.
appreciate that. Appreciate that, Kim. You stole my thunder. That was one of my good for you. And
Let's work with Jerry. He was great.
Larry, where's Larry? Is he still with us? Did he check out?
Yeah, no, I'm still here.
Where's he at? Okay, all right.
Run, Larry, run.
We're thinking about you, Grandpa. We're thinking about you. All right. Guys, let me tell you something. I enjoy working. I'm so proud to be a part of this group, working with each one of you and the different perspectives that are brought forward, and the fact that you guys feel comfortable and feel that strongly about our industry to bring these points up. So thank you very, very much for that. I would be remiss if I didn't thank Michael Fickle. He kept us between the ditches again throughout this meeting. Thank you, Michael. And there being nothing else, I'll call this meeting adjourned. I look forward to seeing y'all on our next visit.